Thank you for tuning into the Devy Devotional Podcast, a monthly show focusing on Devy prospects, strategies, and incoming rookies. Now here's your host.
Welcome back to the Devy Devotional. I'm your host, Dynasty Coach A. As always, I am joined by Aaron Wilcox at Aaron Wilcox 86, and we have a very special guest today. We have Brandon at Devy Deep Dive on Twitter, the host of the Devy to Dynasty Football Podcast, which is recently changed, I believe. I believe it was something else not too long ago. And then also the creator of the Devy Dashboard, which is a YouTube series. They're showing some of the what is it? Film. That's what it is. It's looking at the film. And sorry, I don't know much about that stuff, but we're happy to have you. How are you doing tonight, Brandon?
I'm doing great, thanks. I appreciate you guys having me on. Love talking Devy. Love talking about processes, film watching, ranks, whatever we talk about tonight. I'm excited, so thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, and that's what we're going to get into tonight. We're not really necessarily getting into the players. It's more looking at like the actual process and getting into how to properly rank. Whether you're just trying to learn as an analyst, as a fan, or you're trying to start creating your own rankings. Kind of looking at the important things, whether it's film, analytics, or whatever. Let me bring on my co-host. How are you doing tonight, Aaron?
I'm doing well, and the topics that we're going to discuss tonight, I'm very excited for that. So thank you, Brandon, for coming on. Appreciate it, fighting through that sickness you have going on right now. So this is awesome you're here.
No, I appreciate it. Let's get started.
Absolutely. So why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about the name change and what all's going on with that, just in case people are a little confused about why it's Devy to Dynasty now.
Yeah, well, it's all about timing, right? My podcast I've done for 2.5 years. It was called the Devy Deep Dive Podcast, and I've been a solo host, for about 127 episodes. So I never had a guest for 127 episodes, but created my Devy Dashboard, which is a Notion product. It's a database that I sell for yearly access. Through that, I've got a content team, and we started creating, my podcast was solely on Devy, but we've got guys right now doing C2C analytics and as well as Dynasty. So I felt there was a need for a branding change. So just actually this week I changed it. So previously it was Devy Deep Dive, and now it's Devy to Dynasty Football Podcast, which now kind of encompasses everything that we talk about. I'm trying to do a whole kind of complete programming for everyone, who's involved in C2C and Devy and stuff. And I got my YouTube channel, which is a primary focus of mine right now. I really love cutting up film. I like providing angles, and I've been doing a lot of, I have a new series that I've called The Film Room, where I'll take a player, like I just did Josh Downs. I just did Will Shipley versus Iowa State in the Cheez-It Bowl, where I'll take a player's film, and a lot of times it's all 22 film that I have access to. And I'll break down a player in just a specific game and talk about what I see and provide something that is not out there. Because when most people say they watch film, they're going to a YouTube channel and watching a highlight film, because really nobody has time. If you're going to watch a player have 5 receptions, let's say, on a film, you're scrolling through film and you're trying to find the plays, and that's very time consuming. So a lot of people don't really have the time to do that. So that's kind of what my YouTube channel is about, is to provide those clips and those, short videos to really help people scout film. Because I have found in the Devy community, a lot of people are enjoying trying to become scouts, and I'm no professional. I've never claimed to be a professional. I do this as a hobby, but it's fun. It's a lot. I've educated myself, I feel like, pretty well. So it's just something I have a passion for. So I'm just trying to help other guys scout and, see the real picture. Because as I say on my dashboard, you have to look beyond the highlights, right? You can't. The highlight films are great, but you really have to watch all the bad plays too to find out why they were bad, to really get an overview and a good feel for a prospect. So I think that's kind of what my Devy Dashboard's about. I post films every day on my Slack chat, every other day. I just did Tank Bigsby, all 22 film stuff. So it's fun. But thank you. Yeah, it's great. I'm ready to talk anything you want about Devy.
I love it. But real quick, Josh Downs is a stud, right?
Oh yeah, Josh Downs is a player. Yep.
That's right.
He's got that. I mean, in my book, yeah, he's explosive. He's got good hands. He's twitchy. He's kind of what the NFL is looking for right now. And we were talking pre-show about how next year's class has a lot of, he's one of those guys I talked about, Butte, JSN. These guys are all a little bit on the smaller side, right? So we're going to have a nice crop of, again, this smaller, twitchy guys that, you know, have a little bit of burst, explosiveness, space creation ability. So yeah, he's a good player.
Yeah, he's my boy. I basically talk about him every pod. Like, I'm obligated at this point, like, to mention his name. So I'm glad you brought him up this time. I'm off scot-free.
Yeah, there you go. You can like him. You can like him.
Yes, that's what I like to hear. I do definitely do not get into the film. The listeners know that. But I was actually going to ask you. Do you incorporate analytics into the process at all? Obviously, you already touched on it a little bit, whether it's you or like part of your team. But I love the fact that you're mixing in a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I do. I do to a certain degree, but I really still feel as though a player's success, the analytics to me are predictive measures, right? And that's one of the new podcasts I have on my feed is predictive measures of success with Brett Sanders, and he's a numbers guy, right? I call him the number nerd, right? He's one of our contact team, because he loves the numbers, right? And I mean nerd in a very nice way, by the way. But yeah, so for me, to me, it's all about the skill set. To me, I think what makes the most, what NFL scouts do. I was part of the Sports Illustrated Bible, NFL draft team for a while, like a year and a half ago. And the guy that ran that, I specifically asked him when I spoke to him, I said, you do this for a living. You've made a living scouting players. How much of analytics and early production numbers and breakout, age and all of that play in a role in NFL scouts out there, right? And he was saying not a whole lot. It still comes down to the player, the athleticism, the ability to create space. All of that comes first. Because, like we talked about pre-show just a little bit, I really feel as though a lot of players, every player is in a different situation. So the playing field is not the same. So to base a good player on early production, he could be on a team that just lacks the other weapons on the team, great quarterback, great offensive line, and whatever. So I've always leaned film. I look at analytics a little bit, but to me, it's all about watching a player's movement skills, ability on the field.
Yeah, definitely. But I love, the point you made earlier about how, you're not watching YouTube highlights and you got to get beyond that if you ever want to really do anything. Just like, I'm not looking at yards per carry and stuff like that. I'm diving deep into the actual metrics that matter. Just like you're not going to watch a YouTube highlight and be like, I'm a scout, so you gotta do it right.
Exactly. And that's kind of what I'm trying to provide with my YouTube channel and my database and my Slack chat. I've got over close to 300 guys in there, and I'll post a film and say, hey, here's Tank Bigsby's 18 carries against Kentucky. What do we think? Is he good? Do we like him? What do we see? What do we don't? Because it's just you want to definitely watch a player and really see the good and the bad.
Yep, Toronto Dave's in the chat. He's definitely watching us. But Aaron obviously does a little bit of both with the film and the analytics. But do you have a similar process, Aaron, or how do you go about diving into it? Do you utilize some of Brandon's highlights or YouTube film, I should say?
Oh, yeah, absolutely I do. And what I'll say is I think it's very valid if you are using film-based analysis for your primary way of evaluating players, scouting players for your fantasy teams. Yes, you should be watching all the plays available. So Brandon does a great job putting out those films. What I oftentimes tell people, you might not have time to break down every game that Will Shipley or whatever the player is played during a season. So use whatever resources are out there. There are great people in this field who are putting out rankings, putting out little snippets on Twitter, whatever the case is. But you can watch highlights and see if that really matches up to, let's say, the analytical side of things. So if they have just great metrics and the film really, or at least the highlights, get you interested in that player, then you can dive a little bit deeper, make sure that everything, the fundamentals of that player are really solid. So that's what I encourage people to do if they're not trying to go all in necessarily on film, but they want to just understand a little bit more of how a player plays, how explosive are they? Because I just tell people if the highlights don't get you excited, then I'm sure that watching the full game tape is probably going to be meh. So start with that. Definitely try to dive all the way in. Again, if film is your primary source. But yeah, I enjoy both sides when evaluating prospects.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point Aaron brought up is, if you don't like the highlight film, maybe you shouldn't like the player because those are the highlights. So
Right. Yeah, that's probably a good way to look at it. But yeah, that's one thing I love about looking at the analytics, looking at the metrics is, you get the full story in a couple of seconds. And so, I'm strictly analytics because of time constraints. Not that I think that people can't be good at film analysis or anything like that. Obviously, there's plenty of people that are. I don't have time for it. I don't even have a chance to watch college football. I have business and kids and all that kind of good stuff. So
Sure.
I definitely can't dive into film beyond that. So it's so nice to be able to look at a player and be like, he has a 2.8% big run rate. Yeah, what am I trying to say? Yeah, a big run rate, like over 20 yards per attempt. And so, like, I can see he's not explosive. He's not this like stud player that's gonna score you a bunch of fantasy points, because that's just not who he is. He could be a plotter, he could be a guy that gets 200 and something touches and that kind of thing, but he's probably not going to be this amazing NFL workhorse back when it's all said and done. And so I'm able to see something like that and get a decent idea, and maybe that's the same as looking at like a YouTube highlight and thinking I'm getting the same idea, but
Right.
of who a player is and that kind of thing. And obviously I dive a lot, deeper than that, but I'm just saying it's so nice to get the full picture in a matter of seconds.
Yeah, and I guess I would think of that on the flip side of that, more concerned about trusting those numbers, because there's so many players that have the early breakout. There's so many players that have the early production and all the numbers that we get excited about and don't sniff an NFL field, right? And again, because they're in a different environment, that they're whatever conference they're playing in, big difference between playing in the SEC, versus the Pac-12 as far as defenses and stuff like that. So that's kind of why I lean film, because I actually like to visibly see these players, with my eyes to make my own judgment for them.
Yeah, and I would add too that I think the context matters, because a guy who's not very efficient, let's say yards per carry, or doesn't have a lot of breakaway runs on a really poor offense where the defense keys in consistently on the running game, they're just not going to have, again, those breakaway plays. They're not going to have a high yards per carry or some other metrics. And usually when you're looking at things analytically, you're able to kind of parse that out. You kind of notice, okay, maybe this offense was just really poor, whatever the case is.
Right.
But yeah, there's definitely that context that I like. And just to bring one point from earlier up, I really enjoyed your breakdown on YouTube, Brandon, about Donovan Edwards, running back from Michigan, because I was really excited about his highlights. And you see like his receiving game for his size, it's really promising. But then I started to look at how he was actually functioning as a 3-down back, as a behind or between the tackles every down back. And I mean, it doesn't mean he can't develop there, but right now he's quite raw. He's going to struggle there until he develops. So I'm in the camp that he will develop, but it's very, very helpful to get that full picture.
Yeah, and I think whatever we do, whether it's numbers or film, right, it's all about projection. You have to project something into these players, because they're not going to be drafted for 2 years, right? So you have to talk about, like I just did a podcast. I actually have a new co-host, Jason D. Rienzo of Devy Watch, and my podcast that I'll be dropping this week. We did a film study against Parker Washington versus Marvin Mims, and Will Shipley versus Braylon Allen, and we kind of put them each together against each other, really looking at the different traits and stuff like that. And we watched an enormous amount of film to get that, and we talked about these players and what their deficiencies that we felt that they were, but knowing that Will Shipley's a freshman, he's got 2 more years to get better coaching, he's got 2 more years to get stronger, he's got 2 more years to get better vision and all of that. So especially for those early freshman films. But Donovan Edwards, you're right, Aaron, in that case, is that he's this high Devy asset right now in the 2024 class as far as a Devy running back. But if you really were to watch that film that you watched, you're watching the lack of vision and space creation and running into linebackers and not really trying to shimmy his way around them or whatever. So you have to kind of think and pause. It's like, okay, well, because you're right. Twitter has a good way of really pumping up players, right? The echo chamber in Twitter is quite real. And like you said, John, you don't have time to watch film. And I'm going to say 90% of people out there don't have time to watch film. 90% of the people out there don't have time to make fancy spreadsheets with all these numbers either. So they're depending on guys like me and you, right? For me, maybe for film, you for analytics, Twitter, get some advice, and they create their own ranks. And, you take it all in. And as I always say at the end of my podcast and my guys on the Devy dashboard, it doesn't matter what I think, because I'm not in your mind when you've got to click your button on your mouse to select that player. It's all on you. So you can take all the information that you want from everybody. But when it comes down to it, you are the one who's making the call and drafting that player, right? So you just take it all in and have fun with it.
I do think a lot of people have written off Blake Corum just because of his size.
I understand that.
Yeah, and just given Donovan Edwards the ball and said, "Oh, he's going to be the stud now." And don't get me wrong, I have them basically back to back in my rankings. I honestly I'm not admitting that I'm not saying one's going to be better than the other. I'm admitting that I don't know. I just really don't know at this point.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you watch both of those players, I mean, Corum has more experience. He's going into his junior season. Got a lot of experience last year, but I mean, as far as running the ball vision in between the tackles, it's night and day. I mean, Blake Corum is so much better, and Donovan Edwards is just a raw prospect. I mean, I say it all the time. To go from high school to college is, I believe, an enormous jump, and then going from college to the NFL is an enormous jump. We look at all the 5 stars in the top 15 of each position. Half of them never even sniff our, by their sophomore seasons, they're not even on really the Devy radar. I mean, it's really hard. It's really hard.
Oh yeah, I just drafted a 5-star QB in Sam Heward, and he completely bombed last year. I mean, it was ugly. So.
Yeah, but don't get me started on Devy quarterbacks, because after this year's draft, I am freaking out, man.
This is a C2C draft.
Oh, I know it is, and it's the same thing. I mean. It's like everyone thinks Aller and Klubnik and Wegman, I think that's his name, and all these guys, half of them are going to be busts. They're never going to make it.
Yeah, Toronto Dave said, "This is fun for me. I'm realizing I'm intrigued by film analysis because I'm so unfamiliar with it," which is cool. This is why we're doing the pod and have Brandon on.
Yeah,
absolutely, and we love Toronto there. And then Tommy T, I find it interesting places like Twitter fight about which is better when the NFL screws up on both on a regular basis.
Yeah.
It's so true. I mean, Twitter, that's what Twitter's for fighting and being idiotic. So
yeah, you know what? I don't get involved in any of that. If I'll never criticize someone's take, because I respect everyone's opinion. If you love somebody, then go for it. It's just a silly game we play.
And honestly, it sounds like you're trying to provide more of a service than telling people necessarily who to draft and who to like and that kind of thing.
That's right, because I that is with the niche that I'm trying to build on my YouTube channel, is to provide films that nobody else is. So the Devy community and the scouting community can have a place where you can see angles that you're not seeing anywhere else. And I'm going to give you my opinion. And I pretty much say at the end of each show, I'm making this for you guys, my viewers, my subscribers, and tell me what you think. Let's debate it, on the show sheet. Cause I mean, I've had plenty of misses, so it's just my opinion at the time.
Absolutely. Tommy also says John is always wrong though. Baker 2035. We go back and forth about Baker Mayfield. So he loves that one.
Fresh start for him.
Yeah. Thank God. But, so do you actually get into rankings on your website, like personally, or is that something that you've kind of delegated out to other people, or?
Oh no, that's what my dashboard's all about.
Okay.
It's pretty impressive. I mean, I've got ranks, I've got Devy overall ranks, and then I've got ranks baked by class, and then by position. It's pretty detailed and extensive. So, that's kind of what my Devy dashboard product is. That's what I'm putting out there for people to see. And I've got other people who have top 100 lists, and we do ADP, and it's a fantastic resource for anybody who I'll give you guys a peek see after the show.
I love it. I wonder if that's why Aaron keeps sniping me in this draft. He's checking out your ranks there. I don't know. I don't
Oh,
like
is
it
he?
now.
Nice.
He sniped me probably about 10 times in this draft.
Okay.
And we're
That
through
happens.
17 rounds, so more than half the time.
It's been pretty ugly.
Yeah. Yeah, those are the rounds that you you got to really just take the guys that you want, right?
Yes.
Yeah, honestly, he's put on quite a show. This is my first C2C draft, so I really didn't know exactly how to value everything, value the picks and trades and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's kind of tough when you're like I've been playing Dynasty for a long time, and obviously I know how to trade in a startup. But when you're talking about a 45 round startup, people are trying to send you trades using like round 28 picks and stuff, and it's like, well, I don't even know who the hell's going to be there, much less like how do I value that pick? So it's just been tough to really move around. Meanwhile, Aaron's just moving left and right and making all these moves, and he has so many stud players.
Yeah. I would recommend anyone doing a C2C draft for the first time, don't trade. Just focus on the players that you think are going to fall to you. You know what I'm saying?
That's basically what I ended up doing. I'm like, I'm in the middle. I purposely drafted. I picked my pick at 107 to be in the middle so that I wouldn't get caught in a run or anything like that. I could kind of dictate what my team was going to be. And then after the first probably 7 rounds, when I was involved in some trade negotiations and stuff, but like nothing ever really stood out like, this is a great trade, I need to take this right now. And so I just didn't do it. And then after that, I'm like, I'm done. Like I don't care if somebody sends me an offer or whatever. I'm just going to draft. And so that's what I've been doing.
Hey guys, can you give me 1 second? I got someone banging on my door, my daughter. Just give me 1 second.
Yeah, of course,
Sorry.
of course.
Yeah.
No problem. Well, John, I do respect the stay and put thing, but it's just so fun to go up and get your guy and snatch the hope from somebody else. No.
Now I will say, obviously when it's all said and done, I'm going to have a little more depth than you. Whether that actually matters in a 45 roster, team or anything like that. But you've made some moves for the future picks and stuff like that. And I like, once again, I feel like you've done a masterclass. So it's not, I'm not nitpicking at all. I'm saying you did great work, but I just think that when it's all, obviously I'm going to win this year on the campus side. It's just you're going to be pretty set up for the NFL side when it's all said and done.
All right, guys, sorry about that. I'm back.
No problem. We were just going back and forth about how he sniped me so many times and how I'm going to beat him this year. But he's gonna, like, he has some studs. If he wants to go over some of them, he definitely has some NFL studs that are going to be coming. In fact, including Josh Downs, who we already touched on, who he sniped me the pick before. Come on.
And we'll talk about the things maybe on a separate podcast sometime. But my philosophy too is, if I'm trading up to get all these guys who are more known, who are a little bit higher end assets, I'm fine with that, moving back, let's say in the teens, things like that, because I really think that there's not a huge drop off between some of the picks, some of the players available in the teens and the 20s, for example. A lot of guys drop, but guys in the first couple of rounds, sometimes you want to move up for a guy who is probably very good. So that's just my philosophy.
I completely agree with you. At that point, you should be doing your research where you I agree. Like after 9, 10, 11, guys are just taking their guys. They're just taking their favorite guys. And I've always said that people can look at ADP when they're going into a draft, but if there's guys that you want, I'll take them early. I don't care about ADP, because if it's a guy that I want and because you have to say to yourself, how am I going to feel if I don't get him? And I'm thinking I'm going to wait one more round and someone snipes him. You're going to have that regret. That's going to be horrible, right?
Yeah, honestly, I don't even know if I care about ADP after like round 2. I don't even know how like accurate it is, because there was people, like there was literally players going off the board that are technically like 9th round players in like round 3 or 4 or something like that. And not to say they were all that, of course, but at that point you kind of ADP starts falling off, and I truly stopped looking at ADP probably around like round 7. Like at that point, it was just like, it doesn't matter. There's picks going off the board like 10 rounds ahead,
Yeah, for sure.
Let's just go get your guys. But who were the three guys in the second round that you sniped me? I was naive to think that they were going to fall to me. Once again, I'm at 107. So coming back around, or no, it was the third round, wasn't it? I'm trying to remember now.
You don't have to relive this, John. It's all right.
I know I'm torturing myself here, but yeah, it was bad. I thought, I'm like, okay, well, I love three guys here. They will fall to me. Aaron traded up 3 times and drafted all 3 of them. So that did not work out. Oh man. But, so obviously getting back into the rankings and everything, how exactly do you go about, starting your ranking process? Because especially with Devy purposes, like you said, there's so much projection involved and everything. So where do you start with your ranking process?
I'm pretty simple. I used to do what a lot of people do is they assign a number to a trait, right? And then however the numbers would add up is kind of what their rankings would be. And I used to do that when I was with the Sports Illustrated guys. And I decided to get away from that because if I was like, well, no, I like this player better, I just changed a number and then the player moved up a spot, right? So for me, it's just all about what I see on the field and, given size. I mean, when I'm like scouting a player, I'm looking for space creation, athleticism, explosion, burst, that this is from the running back and wide receiver position. And I really don't have a formula. I just sit there and look at my, I go by tiers. So I'll rank my guys in tiers of, kind of where I think they're going to be drafted based on their skill set. And then within those tiers, I might rank them of what my preference would be if a guy has good size and length. But again, I use that just as a general area because I think there's a lot doing pre-draft ranks, is a good exercise to do. But until you really get to the combine, you get landing spots, you get draft capital. There's such significant roles in really the success of these Devy players. So you don't get too hung up on ranks, but it's going to be a film-based rank for me, not really much analytics. And I'm just going to be looking at like a skill set right now of what I like about their game and who I think is going to translate best to the NFL.
Do you ever get in? Obviously, you just said you don't really get into the analytic part, but do you ever get into like trying to predict 40 times or like look at 100-meter times or anything from high school? Like, do you do any of that?
Not really. I think 40 times are overrated because I'd much rather have a play speed player than a straight line 40 speed. What people have to understand is the combine gives us a lot of great information. I'm more interested in the vertical jump and the 3-cone stuff because these guys train for 40 times. It's all about technique, lean, and everything. And we've seen some fast guys go to the NFL that just never translate on the field because they don't have the movement skills to get open on their breaks, or they're not manipulative. And, for a wide receiver or a running back just doesn't have the vision and stuff like that. So, you want somebody, if somebody runs a 4.6 as a running back, okay, well, that might, not be great. So we have verified numbers and stuff like that. But again, it comes down to, speed is really, I think, more important for a running back to really be elite, to have that burst and speed than I think a wide receiver, because I think a wide receiver can create space physically. It doesn't always have to be speed. As Cooper Kupp said, he ran a very slow 40, but the kid's movement skills and hip turn and explosion out of his breaks is elite. And that's where he makes his money, just, getting people to, he manipulates him before he even makes his break.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to bring up, kind of like a similar situation with David Bell, maybe not to that extent, but, kind of, slow player, but just dominant, at least at the college level.
Jesus, I forgot about David Bell, man. He's really, honestly, he's really been an afterthought, hasn't he?
Yeah.
In this whole draft process. Now that I'm in Scott Fishbowl, I'm in I don't even think I'm seeing him in the ADP, and I think we're in round 9 or something. He's definitely buried in there. But you're right. A lot of guys, and there's a perfect example of a player who had great early production that everyone got excited about early in his Devy career because he broke out at Purdue, and oh my God, he had 1,000 yards, and Rondale Moore was there. He got early breakout age and all that, and then he goes to the combine, has like average athleticism, really not a lot of burst and 3 cone. So he's not really a super big, he's not a great athletic guy. So good contested catch guy, and he might be a great serviceable wide receiver. You know what I mean? But so again, but we're basing him now not on his early production. We're basing him now on the 40 time and his lack of athleticism shown at the combine. And so I really feel like a lot of times doing like early ranks and getting super excited about people, you kind of have to wait for the combine a little bit. Although I think the combine can be like overrated with that straight line speed on 40 times.
Yeah, absolutely. Aaron, what are you looking for when you're starting your rankings process?
Yeah, so I don't necessarily have a numerical score like Brandon was talking about there. I don't necessarily have a analytical model. I don't have Beth. That is John's baby there. Beth does some great work as far as just blending a whole bunch of predictive analytical measures. But as far as my process, I start with recruit status. So whether 5-star, 4-star, where they were in the class, not necessarily weighing anything with that, but just information for me to kind of mull over, and then also go directly into production. So whatever analytical measures, just raw stats, whatever that player did. And then I start getting into athleticism. And like Brandon said, athleticism is not the end all be all, but it matters to a degree. If a guy runs a 4.7, he's not getting drafted day one, day two. As a wide receiver, running back, it's just not happening. So I do look at that. And I also look at some of the things that Brandon talked about, space creation. What is their movement ability? So essentially, are they a versatile player? Are they explosive? All those different components. So I'm not just looking at speed, but acceleration, lateral agility. Yes.
Yep.
So those are some physical things that I'm looking for. And then I kind of go into any negatives about that player. So you got to have all the positives and then weigh the negatives and really see, did they project out to be a good asset? And I just kind of go off those combination of things for my rankings. So I get guys into tiers. I like tier-based ranking, but basically to sort them, let's say I'm really stuck on a couple guys, then maybe I will go back to an analytical measure. Like, is there a guy who just doesn't fit here? Kind of a gross, he just hasn't done much in college. He looks great in a couple of flashes, but he's not a consistent player. And that usually decides the tier. So I recently did that for a big group of players, and I had to move down Raheem Jarrett and Marvin Mims just in that tier, just because they weren't sticking out compared to the other guys. So that's just a couple of examples of how I go about my ranking process.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, Brandon, you'd kind of started to touch on it, but do you really try to stick to ranking by class, or do you rank by position? Do you mix it all together? How do you go about like with your ranks there?
Yeah, I mean, well, in my Devy dashboard, first and foremost, I have a overall Devy positional rank, right? That's at the top of the dashboard. That's where, all the Devy, regardless of class. And so I start there. That is where I begin on. If I was in a draft right now and college football was over, where would I draft these players in what order based on the film that I've watched, and stuff like that. And then through that process, it'll break down the classes for me already. So it's kind of automatically done in my dashboard. So, but yeah, I mean, I have an overall, because when you're in your supplemental drafts, it's different because you're going to just draft that rookie class and you might have a couple free agents. But if you go into a startup, I know a lot of the guys that join my dashboard, they're doing startup C2C leagues and startup Devy leagues. They want to see, by class. So when are you going to swing for Singleton, over a 2023 running back or a 2024 running back, right? So it's hard, and it's all very subjective. So I mean, really, everyone needs to really do their own ranks. They need to look at other people's information and watch film, watch the numbers, and really come up with their own Google sheet of ranks.
Yeah, and I am a big fan of just doing it by class. Let's compare apples to apples. So, like you said, it's hard to compare what's a 2025 quarterback. How is that going to stack up rank wise to a 2023 running back? it is hard, and it's subjective. So I might as well lay out the ranks of the classes. I I definitely think it's a great thing for consumers. People love going into a draft. Okay, let me see a top 100. People
Hmm.
love that, and it's helpful, especially if you don't do your own ranks. But it's hard to put out there as far as an analyst making ranks because it's constantly changing, and you modifying that really implicates then your positional rankings, and sometimes that can be a bit of a mess. So yeah, I just like breaking it down by position and then doing the tier based ranking involved with that. And then once I
Yeah.
get on the clock, then I'm weighing, well, do I really want to draft, a 23 running back? Kind of compare them at that stage, instead of having one big list of every class combined.
Yeah,
Oh,
I mean, and my dashboard breaks it all down like so many ways. It's probably over detailed where you can click on any page and see that. But you're right. I mean, those are all tough decisions. I mean, you're going to take a swing on a production 2024 guy, or are you going to take the 2023 guy who we've already seen 2 years of tape on that is going to hit my dynasty roster earlier? But man, that 2024 guy, he's looking like he could be exceptional. So
Yeah.
those are all the tough decisions that we make when we play this game that we love, right?
absolutely.
Yeah, I really like to break it down into tiers, with all classes included, just because I might feel differently the day that I actually enter the draft, and I might decide to go
Mhm.
ahead and take that 2024 guy just because, and just because I feel like he's a better player, and I'm willing to wait. Whereas tomorrow I might decide no, I want to go ahead and get that production now. I think it's a lot easier in an actual Devy draft. Especially with those tiers, it's so easy to just be like, all right, these guys are good, these guys aren't as good, like that kind of thing. You start
Mhm.
getting into the C to C side. Tell you what, it's been an eye opener once again, being my first one. There were some players that I really liked that I had a little bit lower in the ranks just because they were 2024 guys, 2025 guys, and then you start looking at them going off the board, and you're like, wait a second, this isn't good.
Well, listen, for all of us Devi guys, we all want the shiny new toy, right? I mean, we want to be first with our shiny new toy. And the farther you get into your classes, the 2023 class, we have 2 years of film. 2024 class, we have 1 year of film. And 2025 is all projection. And
Hmm.
my feeling on high school film is a lot of it looks the same because you're looking at players that are just dominating against other guys that aren't even going to be like going to college, right? So they should look exceptional. So for every year a player gets farther away from high school, I feel like high school tape becomes more irrelevant. Like for me, I just did my latest video on YouTube was for Will Shipley, and I don't really care about his high school film anymore.
Right.
I want to watch what he did in his 9 games. He got injured in the season and came back and played for the last 2 months. So I took the last game against Iowa State at the Cheez It Bowl and said, let's see what this kid looks like playing against another good quality college. And a lot of guys just don't translate. So
Yeah, so it kind of sounds like you're a little down on Shipley, probably more so than most.
after watching what I've watched, and especially discussing it with Jason DiRienzo, who went to the scouting academy, and him and I've had a lot of conversations. We watched like 5 games of all 22 film on him. Now, he was injured last year.
Mm.
The offensive line was solid. It wasn't like one of the worst offensive lines. I mean, yeah, I came away, and we both discussed it on my latest podcast. I've yet to release it on he hasn't when I watch these films, I'm looking for wow moments for freshmen. I'm looking for those moments that I'm like, oh wow, okay, he just made that guy miss, and the burst and the acceleration, that's what we're looking for. Honest to God, I watched 4 films of his and he looked like a plotter. I mean, who really didn't do anything. So yeah, to answer your question, right now, am I concerned that he could be an overvalued debit asset? Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to hit the panic button, but now he's in the back of my mind that, boy, I'm going to really take an early look at him midway through next season. And if he
Mm.
doesn't flash with a lot of highlight films and he's still just churning out small yards and running into the back of his offensive lineman, which he did extensively on the films that we watched. Yeah. But I think the Devy community has a tendency, and, he's following Travis Etienne. And this is what I talked about on my podcast. I think we follow into these traps, especially in our supplemental drafts, is just, yeah, he was a high recruit. He's going to Clemson. he's going to get drafted early. That's just what happens. But not all of them pan out just because they follow a great player who ended up going to the NFL. And we had 3 years of great production out of that Clemson running back. Oh, now they've got a 5-star coming in. I don't know if he was a 5-star or 4-star or whatever, but the hype is there. He's the next great Clemson running back. He's high in value. So now I'm looking at it and saying to myself, okay, well, we have a whole year worth of film of this guy. Let's dig in and see what we're looking at. Because most people aren't looking at him like right now. They just think he's a top, top 10 Devy running back. And after what I saw, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, that's very interesting because I have him outside of my top 12, and I would say that that's not the norm. So I'm definitely picking up analytically something that was very similar things that you are. And I definitely, we talked about, and it was big time run rate that I was trying to spit out of my mouth earlier tonight. Yeah. So like that's one of the metrics that I look at and love, and not to say I'm very much so the person that says, do not use one metric. Like, please don't use a bunch of metrics, like get the whole story and that kind of thing. But right. I definitely do like looking at the big time run rate. And, I don't think he has it when it comes to that. Now, like, I don't, he's still high up there, pretty high up there. Yeah, and it's only 1 year. He was a freshman. Like, there's so much that can happen with Will Shipley.
Absolutely.
But I just, once again, like you said, most people have him in top 10, maybe even top 5, and I just can't quite get behind that.
Yeah.
What do you think, Aaron? Are we crazy?
No, you guys are not crazy at all. We could go back to the Donovan Edwards thing. Some similarities there. But at the end of the day, these guys really talented recruits. They do have a lot of athletic upside. Both of them have receiving abilities. They just need to put it together between the tackles. So it's a bit of a projection. And Brandon's totally right that the Devy community wants to prop up these 2024 guys because we haven't seen them hit their ceiling yet. They have a potentially very large ceiling, but we don't know. I mean, they could have a crazy low floor too. So there's more risk involved, but the unknown is so tantalizing for so many. Mm-hmm. So I totally understand the conundrum there. And going back to maybe a ranking discussion, I noticed that there were some runs of 2025 prospects in our draft. And to kind of get ahead of that, or not even get ahead of that, but to adjust to all the guys flying off the board from, let's say, a given class, or you see a position run too, sometimes you just want to go with the flow and grab a guy while they're still available, even if it is quote unquote reach. So sometimes when you're drafting, rankings, things like that go out the window, and you have to adjust to what your drafting room is showing.
I agree. And I will say, now at the point I'm at now, ranking players is very easy because I literally just throw it into a computer and it just spits it out.
Yeah. But you're one of those guys. Okay.
Right. But it like you said before, it took a lot of time to get to that point, and
I'm sure.
It definitely. So while I love the fact that I'm able to stay up until 2 a.m., 3 a.m., whatever, like working on the spreadsheet and doing all that. You're just watching the film instead of doing that. So I guess, I was kind of lying earlier when I said I don't have enough time. I guess it's just what you want to dedicate your time to.
Yeah, exactly. It's what you want to say. You're a numbers guy. I'm a film guy, and that's cool. I mean, it gets you excited, and what I do gets me excited. So it's good stuff.
Yeah, but now it spits it out and it says that Will Shipley is not in the top 10, and I go, okay. And I always like to look at it. I don't just trust it just to trust it. There's definitely errors that can be made. So, I go in and I look at it, and then most of the time, this looks accurate. It makes a lot of sense. And Shipley's kind of one of those. And so I kind of do like micro tiers at the top, especially. And in my rankings right now, Will Shipley is in tier 5 for running backs. So, it might sound crazy, but there's probably, there's only like 2 or 3 guys per tier, like that kind of thing. So it's more like these are the guys that I truly think are going to be studs, like your Bijan, your Travion Henderson, whoever, these are the guys that could be a stud, like a Braylon Allen, somebody like that, like could be a stud, but still have some questions that you have to answer. And then you start getting into other guys like a Devin Kane or a Will Shipley or somebody like that. And that's when it's like, okay,
it's all based on a projection, right? A lot of football left to be played.
Exactly. I love all the ranking talk and everything, but the whole reason why we're here is because we all love Devy. We all love playing it and everything, but do you have any kind of advice for anyone that's trying to get into Devy or trying to get better at Devy, whatever it might be?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know if you guys were aware I did a Debbie Summit back in May. If you saw any of that, it was a big event that I held. It was a 6-hour live feed event. I had a bunch of great, guests and
I do remember seeing that now. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was really to introduce the game of Debbie. It was all about we had 30-minute segments of talking about how to get into Debbie and whatever. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions on Debbie. A lot of people think the first thing that they think of is I don't watch college football, and I don't have a lot of, it takes up too much time, right? So my suggestion, and I've said this in the past to other people who've asked me the same question. If you have an interest in Debbie, if you're in dynasty leagues and you understand what the concept of Debbie is, which is a short term for a developmental player that you're going to put on your taxi squad on a dynasty roster, I would suggest that if you have an interest in it, is to, and you assume you got to play dynasty, I think, before you can really play Debbie, right? So assuming this conversation and answering your question is about a dynasty league, is to get your other teammates and say, who's interested. I've done this with 2 or 3 leagues in the last 2 or 3 years where I've had basically dynasty leagues with just rookie drafts. And we've added a 1 or 2 round Debbie league or Debbie draft after our rookie draft. And now all of a sudden you're in a Debbie league. I mean, that is how simple it is. You don't have to watch college football to play Debbie. There's resources out there like I provide that are out there to give you the lists when you get into your Debbie drafts. It's, so if you have an interest in it, you can find Debbie, leagues that are out there that are looking in a startup Debbie league. But again, I think you can convert any dynasty league into a Debbie league. And that's how I would, if you, like I said, if your co-owners in the league are interested and you all want to play a Debbie league, you can simply convert that what you have. And if not, you can find startups out there that have Debbie leagues. But I would always recommend, for me, listen, I've gone from a 2-round Debbie draft after a rookie draft to a C2C, which is a 45, roster college, right? And I have found my sweet spot of what I like the best. I respect all of them and all, the small Debbie leagues and the C2Cs. What I find to be the most, what I like is having a 2 or 3 round Debbie draft because it makes the rookie draft more relevant. That's the bad thing about C2C leagues is the rookie drafts are meaningless because there's nobody to pick. Right. So the less Debbie players that you have on your taxi squads, I like having a rookie draft with at least 3 rounds of players that I'm excited to get my hands on. Right. Because rookie drafts that just suck because there's like nobody there kind of isn't a whole lot of fun. So I like to have my cake and eat it too, because I like both the rookie drafts and the Debbie drafts. So I would recommend, that is how you get started.
Yeah, I love the fact that, like you said, you're not going to go to your best friend that's only ever played redraft and be like, hey, let's join this Debbie league, that kind of thing. So having that dynasty background definitely makes a lot more sense and
for sure
and everything. But, it's like, it was just like me. I got into dynasty, I loved it. And then I feel like the next step is getting into a Debbie league. You want to get better at rookie evals, which is basically what I wanted to do. Like I wasn't, that's why I created the model. I was bad at rookie evals because I didn't watch college football and I listened to people that maybe weren't giving me the best advice. And,
That's true.
I was making some bad choices. And so I finally got sick of it and just said, hey, I'm going to create my own ranks. And then, that became all of this. Now I have a Debbie pod. I still don't watch college football, but yet I sit here and talk about Debbie.
Yeah.
it's
Well, you're not alone with guys that do that are just all about numbers. So I respect that.
All right, so Toronto Dave actually wants us to explain a Debbie draft to him like he's 5, because I'm sure there's some people out there that maybe don't quite understand. You still have a rookie draft, on top of everything else. Aaron, Brandon, whoever wants to discuss it.
Well, I'll certainly discuss it. A Debbie draft is no different than a rookie draft as far as the process. It could either be a snake or it's typically not a snake in a Debbie league. It's usually goes 1 to 10, 12, then go back to 1 again. And you're basically picking college players who are ineligible to participate on your dynasty rosters, and they are on a taxi squad. So For example, so if you had a Devy draft this year, you would be taking Bryce Young, you would be taking CJ Stroud or Bijan Robinson, and you'd be putting them on your NFL taxi squad waiting for next year. Another great thing about playing in the Devy League is the NFL draft is even better because it can be so much fun having Bijan Robinson already on your roster and knowing that he's going to be a stud in the NFL, and you just are on the edge of your seat waiting to see where he gets drafted. It can be heartbreak as well when he goes to like a shitty landing spot too. So, so a Devy draft in a lot of the leagues that I kind of described earlier, we would have a rookie draft, shortly after the NFL draft. And then I usually wait for a Devy draft in the summertime just to extend the fun, something to look forward to, where then you would do a 2 or 3 round Devy draft. If you have 10 guys in your league, it's a 10 round, it's a 10 person, 10 slots per round, however many Devy slots you have, whether it's 1, 2, or 3. And it's just simply a draft, just like a rookie draft, but you're drafting college players for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Aaron, I haven't heard enough of your voice tonight, so I want to hear from you, buddy. Dave's also asking, like, how does it work with the actual rookie draft, going forward, like once you're in year 1, year 2, like that kind of thing. Obviously there's some leagues that do it a little differently, but, why don't you go ahead and talk about your experiences at least?
Yeah, well, at least my experience, I started with very similar to you guys, Dynasty, then I gravitated towards Devy. I just wanted more. Loved scouting these guys, so might as well just draft them while they're still in college. And then C2C, which is a whole nother level of drafting guys and then actually starting them on the college side while having your dynasty, your NFL side as a separate roster. And I like the opportunity to win 2 championships in one season. That's fun. You're really king of the hill then. But yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's a super fun process. I guess to chime in on, the advice for people though, from my experience, it's just pay attention to news, pay attention to the changing things. I'm not going to roast Levi, one of our league mates, but John and I were just chatting with him, and it was like he drafted a guy who, he's had success in the past, but the new coaching staff doesn't necessarily love him. And that's what I mean about just really trying to pay attention to news. Not saying that Levi, for example, didn't do that, but that'll get you a little bit of an edge for some people who are just drafting based on, recruit ranking or last year's rankings, whatever the case is. So find good resources you trust as well, like Devy Dashboard, websites, C2C, Campus Academy is a great resource. There's just a lot of talented podcasts out there to check out. Find people that you trust, ask them, and you will be able to slowly get started in this landscape of Devy and C2C.
Yeah, I get reached out on Twitter all the time. Guys reach out to me all the time. How do I get started? Will you help me with my draft? And I'm like, absolutely. It provided so much enjoyment for me. I'm going to
It is great. I love it when people reach out, like you said, and all that. And you heard it here first. Levi done messed up. You made the wrong pick, dude. Sorry about your luck. No.
I feel so bad.
No, he'll enjoy this. He's a listener as well. But all right, Brandon, this has been awesome. We've had a lot of great talks here, and I think we answered all of Toronto Dave's questions. Did you guys touch on like the actual rookie drafts? Basically, they call it a Devy depleted rookie draft, where they're all those players that have already been picked onto your Devy squad are no longer available in the rookie draft, but there's still players that squeak through, like a Jameson Williams, Kenny Pickett, even Joe Burrow, at one point was probably somebody that squeaked through in some drafts and stuff like that. So there's still players that can be had. It's just not nearly as exciting because there's the obvious players like a Breece Hall or Bijan Robinson or whoever, those players are already going to be on teams, but it doesn't, usually, you can still get some players, but yeah, definitely you're not going to be picking too many 5th round picks. I can promise you that.
Yeah.
But Brandon, like I said, we've touched on a couple players here. You might go ahead and just answer Josh Downs and Will Shipley here, but who would you consider in all of Devy right now as some of your buys and sells? You don't have to get crazy into it, but just a couple.
Well, I've got a crazy one that I put out a YouTube show, I don't know, a month ago with my good buddy Corey Pereira, who's part of my dashboard content team, that we did a buys and sells show. So I guess I'll, talk about the one guy that I had, and I'm very interested because I'm interested to hear what your guys' thoughts process is on this. I had it sell as Bryce Young. All right. Now, most people are going to think I'm insane because he's going to be arguably the QB1 or possibly 2 in next year's draft. And again, looking at the film, he seems to be a great passer. I don't think he has elite arm talent by any means, but I'm just concerned about his size. He's 6 foot, 193 pounds. The lightest quarterback right now in the NFL is Kyler Murray at 207, but he's 2 inches shorter than what Bryce Young is at 6 foot. I think Bryce Young's also going to come in at under 6 feet. So I guess my question is, again, trying to think for myself, not just going with the herd. I'm concerned is he could be the best passer and the best, guy in between the ears and best teammate, franchise, leader out there. But does he have the physical ability to withstand getting slammed to the turf at 193 pounds? I mean, I think it's a legitimate concern. Obviously, I'm on an island all by myself because there isn't a player out there and an analyst and an NFL analyst out there that is even questioning his size. But yet, if you look at the NFL, there hasn't been any quarterbacks that have been successful under 200 pounds from what I can see in my research. And I mean, he just weighed in at Alabama at 193 pounds.
Oh, just recently.
Just recently. So this isn't something like from last fall or
right,
or something like that. What are your guys' opinion on that? What are your thoughts? I mean, should be some concern at all? Or are we just going to because he plays for Alabama and he's the Heisman Trophy winner, are we just going to forget about all of that and just, I don't know. I'd love to hear your opinion.
Well, first, I love the contrarian thought. It's great to think about because there's, if you're just looking at the metrics, dude's a stud. There's not too many things that are going to stand out and say that Bryce Young is bad. But I try not to get into size concerns with like wide receivers. We're once again getting back to Josh Downs. I don't care that he's 175 pounds. It really doesn't bother me at all. But with the QB, being under 200 pounds is definitely not ideal. And I mean, I guess I would kind of hope or assume that he would be 200 pounds at some point. But even then, you're barely crossing a threshold. So I don't hate questioning it. But man, it's going to be tough looking at these numbers and just being like, I'm out just because of his size. It's really going to be tough.
And I get it. Listen, and this is where I'm just trying to think logically, right? I have many shares of Bryce Young. I'm in many leagues. I've actually sold him for NFL talent. I sold him recently for Dobbins, Gesicki, and Sutton, and a first round 2023 pick. I sold Bryce Young for.
That's actually not bad. I really don't mind that.
Which I feel like, okay, I got 3 NFL assets that I know are going to produce, and I got the number 1, pick for him. I mean, that's what this guy's value is, right? So if you're going to play the value game in Devy, and especially after this year, seeing the quarterback collapse, Sam Howell was propped up. Matt Corral, everyone thought was a top 10 guy. Malik Willis was like the second pick in the draft for at least a couple months before the process. And we saw what happened. I'm just wondering in January, are we going to all of a sudden, our questions going to start being asked like, wow, okay, well, yeah, he's been really productive, but man, I wonder if that size is really going to be something he can withstand, because let's not forget too, in Bama, he's had a nice clean pocket for a long time. He's playing behind the best offensive line. He gets drafted by a shitty team with a bad line, running for his life. We'll have to see.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, like, people hated on Mac Jones. Bryce Young doesn't even necessarily have Mac Jones numbers, in the same offense. And so I get the concerns. I definitely get it. But, at the same time, I feel like if he was a rushing QB, maybe I'd be a little more concerned about it. But I mean, dude does not run. So, if he can get behind a good offensive line, but I guess your concerns might be more that the NFL is just like, yeah, we're out. And then at that point, you've kind of lost some value. And, taking a draft or a trade like you did, where you got multiple actual NFL pieces and, a future depleted first, but still like you're getting some nice NFL stuff that, that are already fairly proven at that point. I like that trade a lot, but, and that doesn't mean that you'll be right. Young could come out and be a complete stud, and you're gonna be like, well, maybe I shouldn't have traded him for 4 pieces.
Yeah.
But
but also in those leagues where I sold Young, I'm already stacked at quarterback, and I have like Khalib Williams on 2 of my Devy rosters, right? So I've got, not only am I already great at I had the ability, I could afford him. Now, if I was in a league that was like depleted heavy, I probably wouldn't have done that, and I would just have rolled the dice with him.
Now, have you dropped Bryce like substantially in your ranks?
No, because I think the Devy quarterback position is in complete shambles. I think it's all based on projection. I think there's probably 3 or 4 guys maybe that we can trust that is going to end up currently being NFL guys, but I think all of the rest of them, whether it's Anthony Richardson or Van Dyke or Will Levis or, the list goes on and on. Jackson Dart, he's a Devy darling right now. Nobody knows if he's going to pan out or not. He was just a 5-star recruit that, looked good, played at USC for a year, flashed a little bit. Everyone was out on Covis, Slovis rather. So everyone was excited to get Jackson Dart. He flashed a little bit. He looked pretty good, but he hasn't done anything to warrant being this Devy QB asset. So in Devy, pretty much I'm fading quarterbacks, just especially after this year, because I think 80% of them aren't going to make it. I mean, the most we get are 2 or 3 quarterbacks a year at most. So why spend time? I'm not even like watching film on quarterbacks. I'm not wasting any time doing that. I'm going to focus on running backs and wide receivers and see if I can't find those mid and late gems by watching film on those players.
Yeah, I think that those are good opinions, Brandon. And honestly, that probably counts as your sell high, right? All these quarterbacks like Dart and whatnot who are just not very proven. And I will say I just drafted Bryce Young in this startup that John and I are doing, but he
I skipped Bryce Young and let him fall to him the next pick.
There you go, John. Good job, John.
I took Jahmyr Gibbs, and although I will say that the QB scoring in this league is a little funky, but I definitely considered taking him, but I did let him fall to Aaron at 8.
Absolutely. And 8, I thought that was a value at that point. I wasn't going to take him at 2, 3, 4 overall by any means. So,
right.
But ultimately, we have seen guys succeed. Guys have paved the way, these shorter dudes. Russell Wilson, 5'11", Kyler Murray, 5'10", barely 200 pounds. So the NFL will be willing to, play
take a quarterback.
Shot. Oh, yeah,
absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. So, I mean, listen, the NFL, Goodell and all these guys, I've said it a million times. I just can't believe we can't find 32 people in this world that can play this position at a high level. I mean, that just tells you, we got, Mariota, for Christ's sake, starting, for an NFL franchise. I mean, that's how dismal the quarterback situation is in the NFL. I mean, you've got your top 7, 8 guys who are elite that they market the league around. But I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think half the teams in the NFL wish they had a different quarterback option than what they currently have. So you're right. So you're absolutely right, Aaron. They're going to take a shot and say like, yeah, he's skinny. You look at him, he's built, not very strong. I mean, he was doing an interview and he looked very small, so I don't know how that is going to work, but teams will take a shot because they're just, but I don't know. Maybe I can't say that because they didn't freaking draft any quarterbacks until the 3rd round this past year. So maybe they're getting smart and saying, you know what, we're fading the whole position. And we're going to go with a retread. So
could be. I think Alabama, just teams seem to buy in, especially recently with their quarterbacks. So we'll see.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. Being that I'm newer to the whole Devy and college football thing, and I can't really compare it to how I felt about QB classes in the past and things, because I wasn't ranking and projecting and doing all that kind of stuff. So it's really tough for me to go back and say like what it could have been. But I definitely agree with you. For me, it's 2 clear top guys. Whether you agree that Bryce should be up there because of size concerns or not, but like play wise, it's 2 clear top guys, and then man, it gets really, really ugly quick after that. I mean, there's a couple guys that I like. You had mentioned a couple of them, but definitely not Jackson Dart. Get the hell out of here with Jackson Dart.
Yeah, I mean, and this is kind of what happens. It's the Twitter echo chamber. And I'm not criticizing it because I'm part of it, but that's why there's a lot of players that get propped up because people don't want to be I have no problem thinking for myself. I think a lot of people don't have the confidence to take the bold take. They just want to kind of follow along with what the perceived what they should be doing versus really taking a look at it and making your own decision.
Yeah, and I mean, I definitely try to be that voice. I'm not quite there as far as being a big voice yet, but trying to get there. When I've been all out on Tank Bigsby, I'm talking about Will Shipley's out of my top 12. I'm trying to be that guy. Not be the echo chamber. I don't know, like. It's fun. It's actually fun to me because I'm trying to say, like, I'm trying to be out on these guys before we get to the NFL, because once the draft happens or the combine happens, you're screwed. You have an Isaiah Spiller that you thought was going to be the stud running back.
Yep.
And next thing you know, you're screwed. Yeah. So I'm trying to be out before that.
That's right. I mean, we can't lose sight of the fact that only the elite make it, right? I mean, so 80% of these guys that we're watching and all these deep lists and all that stuff, there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of work to really watch their film.
All right, in Toronto, Dave had one more question. Sorry, just to clarify, a Devy draft this year would be classes 2023 through 25. That is correct for like a startup. Yep. There's different things as far as supplemental drafts and all that kind of stuff. But if you're getting into a startup, whether it was Devy or C2C, those would be the classes. Some let you get into like high school players and stuff like that, but at least the leagues that I'm in, it's strictly 2023 through 2025.
Yeah, I got one of those crazy high school leagues, so.
Do you? Yeah. I tried doing that. Actually, I created a high school quarterback model, and I didn't want to do it for the other ones because I just, QB is a much, more important position. And so I was just like, oh, screw it. And I actually worked with Katie Flower. I don't know if you really know her or not, but.
Oh, yeah. She's always on my Slack chat. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So she obviously is more film based as well, but she wanted to work with me and try and figure out if we could like nail down some of these high school QBs coming out and these recruits. And so I went through and I created a whole model and I did all of it and I felt pretty good about it. And then I kind of went back and looked, like, once I knew a little bit more about college and like had tweaked the model and stuff like that, and I realized it was crap. There really wasn't much to it. And I think kind of lends to what you were talking about before. Like, there's no way, like, I can tell you a player playing in the SEC in college is a stud is probably pretty good. A player playing at the Mountain WAC and is good, is probably decent, or whatever, not great. I can't tell you that with high school. Like, maybe there's a way to find out exactly like how good these divisions are and all that kind of stuff, but I've never really gotten to that point of knowing, so it's so difficult. Looks like. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry.
I was going to say, it looks like Aaron wants to chime in.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, you perfectly led into one of the things that I was going to bring up tonight. It's like there's two areas that I particularly think that film is important for. I mean, it's important overall, and especially if you enjoy it, but incoming freshmen, we just don't know enough based on high school prediction. Like you said, the quarterback play, the systems, all those things. I mean, you just can't go off production for some of these high school guys. So very important to have some sort of film analysis on them. And then some guys who you just don't see them produce, like guys who are stuck at Alabama and various reasons why they haven't really done much yet. Or there's, Ohio State receivers, Jamison Williams. I mean, nobody thought he was good besides probably the people who were actually watching him coming into college, things like that. Those were the people who were in on Jamison Williams, but he was stuck 2 years behind super talented guys at Ohio State. So I really think that those are two areas, the incoming freshmen and the guys who are either been injured or just stuck behind talent, where film analysis is particularly effective for.
Yeah, I mean, he's a perfect example. He was my wide receiver one, heading into the draft. Well, Jamison Williams, based solely on film, on his speed with the ball in his hands, didn't have the breast. One thing I'm concerned about is his physicality facing press. But other than that, I thought he was a dynamic player. But you're absolutely right. The perfect example of a guy who had no early production, and everyone questioned, well, how can you have him as your number one? He couldn't beat out the Ohio State wide receivers. I'm like, well, look at the Ohio State wide receivers. It's not like you're telling me this against Oregon or something, right? I mean,
Right.
So it's in context, but that's a good point, Aaron.
Yeah, and that is great. And I definitely try to pick up on small samples, and like a Jameson Williams. Like, even though he didn't have a lot at Ohio State, when he was at Ohio State, like, he did well when he was on the field. He just didn't have a lot of opportunity to do much. So I do try to pick up on some small sample sizes, but then you can get in trouble by doing that as well when you're just looking at metrics and small samples. So, like, I try not to be too crazy with it, but like that, there's definitely parts, especially I would assume high school film, where the film is probably going to be the best way to look at it, because I can't differentiate, at least as is, between this high school player and this high school player if this guy was playing against the best defenders and this guy was playing against scrubs. Like, I can't tell you that.
Yeah, I'd say so. When I watch high school film, I'm just looking for movement skills. I'm looking for a running back who can, dead leg and pivot and reaccelerate, and or is a high school film just a bunch of guys, running through open lanes, just outrunning everyone, right? So I think it's kind of the same thing with wide. Yeah, so it's everything kind of, even with the wide receiver, it's the same thing. I mean, is he just not ever facing press and just running, and he's faster and bigger and stronger than everybody else, and he's got these highlight reel tapes? Or is he, the stop routes and the in route breaking routes? Does he have technique, and is he maybe a more advanced than the other players? So it's all about movement skills that I look for in film, individual traits per position.
Yeah, I like that. Just seeing if they even have the capability of kind of taking that next step. Not necessarily like who they are as a player right now, but are they ready to take that next step?
Yeah. One thing I wanted to just mention that I think is really important for all of us to remember, whether you're a film guy, whether you're a numbers guy, is that I have this saying that intangibles matter, right? And what we don't know is in scouting or even looking at numbers or whatever, is what the makeup is of these individuals, and so much goes into the success of being a successful football player, more than just physical traits and athleticism. You need to have the dedication to work out. I would imagine that there's probably a lot of players that went to the NFL thinking that they were the shit and that they could get away with maybe, working out, lifting weights, doing whatever, getting in the film room with their coaches, but they were so much better in college, and they go to the NFL and learn a hard lesson that there are other guys that could be less talented than them, but man, they outwork their ass over and over again. And they're the ones that are going to end up sticking on the team and getting on the field because they work at their craft, and they live and breathe football. So those intangibles about what these players are, how dedicated they are, and all of that stuff, we don't know any of that. And especially for the quarterback position, it's all in between the ears. I personally think Mac Jones is going to end up being the best quarterback out of that class. Now, that could be a hot take or not, and I don't care about that he can't run and all of that stuff. All the best quarterbacks, Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, they think they had the mental processing to sling the ball and get it to where it needed to be on time. And, but I think in the Devy community, we get all hung up on, oh, well, from fantasy, it doesn't bring the rushing yards, this, that, and the other, but it's just an opinion.
Yeah, that's interesting. It is hard to really have any idea what the intangibles are. There was a guy on Twitter last season who tried to break down give every wide receiver an intangible grade, and it's just like, how do you do that? I don't. Yeah, right. So I think that's the missing piece of the puzzle in our evaluation. That's why all of our models, all of our evaluation will have its misses, and we just all need to realize that for sure.
Yeah, we got to realize first and foremost that this is just a hobby that's for fun, and
right.
We can't really take it all that seriously.
Yep. Hard to perfect it, that's for sure.
Sorry, I'm yelling at my kids on camera, but I told them to go to bed, and yet they are still up. I agree with everything you guys said. I love all of it. It's been a ton of fun and definitely a learning experience. I also love me some Mac Jones. Toronto Dave is in agreement as well. And it definitely would not surprise me. I was very high on Mac going into the process. That was kind of when I first started my first model was that class. And then but then I started getting into the Devy stuff. But I included Mac Jones' Devy numbers into the Devy model just to keep an eye on like who compares to him and like that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Mac's
That's
pretty high.
perfect.
Yeah, he's pretty high, and there's not too many players that compare or around that. I also left, well, not a name that we want to talk about right now. I left Deshaun Watson in there, and then there's a couple other players that I left in there just to try and like be able to compare tiers and things like that. But
yeah, I'm going to go on record. If that guy doesn't get at least what Ridley got for putting $1,000 bet out, I know they're making an example out of Ridley because they want to just kibosh that whole betting in NFL. They don't want to go down that road. But for all the stuff that Deshaun Watson, if there's smoke, there's fire, and he should at least be suspended. The NFL needs to have some class. I mean, kids look up to these players as role models. And I know it's about money. Everything in life's about money. I get it. I'm not stupid, but that man should be sitting out at least a year for what he did.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. We've already touched on it a little bit, but why don't you go ahead and tell us, Brandon, where everyone can find you, what you're up to, if you're like having any particular projects. Obviously you just had the brand change and all that, but what all's going down?
You can find me on Twitter at Devy Deep Dive. If you're listening to this podcast and you're looking for a resource to, get rankings, get ADP, do mock drafts, get all 22 films dropped in your, in the Slack chat every, few days a week, reach out to me and I'll tell you all about it. All I ask is you buy me a case of beer for a year, and I do my best film work when I'm drinking. So, yeah, and that's good on my YouTube channel. And John, you're the perfect kind of guy that I want you to start watching my videos, because I know you can find 11 minutes to watch the Will Shipley film and look at what I'm saying and look for yourself, so you can start to, just get a little bit of that film work in you. That's all.
Oh, I'm definitely going to start using it as like confirmation bias, and so I can send it to Aaron and be like, hey, you remember how I told you I don't like this player? Well, guess what?
Yeah, exactly. But I thank you guys for having me on. I appreciate it. Anytime, you want to talk Devy and up, hit me up. I could talk about this stuff all night.
Absolutely. And we will definitely take you up on that. Aaron, do you have any words of wisdom before we get out of here?
No, those were excellent words of wisdom. That's all from me. Good show tonight.
All right, everybody. Well, we appreciate you listening. Thank you so much, Brandon, for jumping on. We hope to have you back on very soon, and we'll take you up on that offer. But for now, we're going to go ahead and cash out. See you guys.
See ya.